Pakistan has had 29 prime ministers since 1947, none completed a full 5-year term. The national politics in Pakistan was mostly dominated by the army. Why is that? Is the military so strong? And what are the consequences of having a military-run nuclear state? A recent airstrike by Iran pointed at militant bases coupled with border disputes at both the Western and Eastern Front. Can Pakistan withstand internal and external conflict? In this video, we'll dive deeper into why the upcoming elections are important for not only the economy of Pakistan, but for the entire world's stability. So stay tuned till the very end. The importance of elections for the country. Pakistanis are getting ready to elect a new leader on February 8th, a person who will have to deal with the country's greatest economic crisis ever, a growing terrorist threat that has heightened tensions with Iran and Afghanistan, and the long-running border dispute with India. But with former Prime Minister Imran Khan barred behind bars, the military is set to play kingmaker yet again. Even though he was dismissed from the February ballot, Khan remains the most beloved politician in Pakistan and was the country's most recent Prime Minister. And this couldn't have happened at a much worse time, as Pakistan suffered for a terrible couple of years. The rupee hit a record low, prices skyrocketed for essential items, inflation went out of control, and foreign reserves fell. Severe austerity measures have accompanied Pakistan's attempts to rejoin the IMF's loan program that the country joined in 2019, which Khan vehemently opposed while he was Prime Minister. But worst of all, militant activity in Pakistan has risen. Many Pakistanis are searching on the internet for, is Pakistan a failed state? But how did the country get here? And what consequences would arise if Pakistan collapsed? Ever since its birth, one of Pakistan's biggest problems has been its territorial disputes. Connected to jihadism in Pakistan, one example of this is the Durand Line, a boundary that the British drew to divide Pashtun lands during their colonial rule. The Taliban in both Pakistan and Afghanistan essentially reject this border and claim sovereignty over Pakistan's KPK province. This territorial dispute has created a gateway for the militants to sneak into Pakistan. To make matters worse, the Taliban has widespread influence over the 40 million ethnic Pashtuns living in Pakistan. If internal unrest continues to rise in the country, the TTP Taliban could use their nationalist agenda to separate the KPK from Pakistan. Just to the south of the KPK lies another province that has a history of issues with the government of Pakistan, Balochistan. Pakistan's largest province has been struggling with separatist forces since 1948, who believe that Balochistan is severely underdeveloped and mostly ignored by the government of Pakistan. A weak central government would allow the separatist forces to gain independence from Pakistan. If these two provinces were able to separate from Pakistan, the country wouldn't have much left. And further complicating things for Pakistan is its eastern neighbor India and their dispute over Kashmir. Pakistan is believed to have 165 nuclear weapons and 4 plutonium reactors, among others, as of 2021. Although in theory the threat of mutually assured destruction should prevent a confrontation in Kashmir, the events of the 1999 Kargil War cast doubt on this claim. If Pakistan's military capabilities were to decline due to an internal crisis, India could feel pressured to pursue its interests over the line of control, and a nuclear showdown is more likely to occur if either of these countries gets desperate. The results will be devastating for not only South Asia, but the whole world. But that's not even the worst thing that could happen. Pakistan's collapse could provide an opportunity for non-state entities, rogue agencies, militant groups, or individuals to acquire or sell its nuclear assets. More than 160 nuclear weapons making their way into the market will create an imbalance in the world. There would be an abundance of prospective purchasers due to the anticipated increase in separatist and jihadist activity, leading to the worldwide proliferation of nuclear weapons. And it all depends on Pakistan's elections. A stable government can stabilize relations with neighbors with peace policies. Military involvement has kept the country from initiating peace talks with its neighboring countries. The Pakistani military sees countries like Afghanistan and India as matters of national security and keeps an active role in devising foreign policies when it comes to these countries. A stable government is also important to avoid further economic debacle of the country. Pakistan economic crisis. Over the past few years, Pakistan's imports have been way higher than its exports, particularly fuel. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, which caused a global spike in oil prices and led to a large deficit in Pakistan's trade deficit, this increased cost of oil imports depleted Pakistan's foreign currency reserves, which began to run dry within a few months. Following protracted talks, Pakistan agreed to a third $3 billion bailout from the IMF in June 2023 in order to qualify, adding to the country's already substantial foreign debt risk. In the deal, government fuel subsidies had to be removed, power and gasoline prices spiked, and household budgets kept draining, which is highly concerning. 4 million people in Pakistan are projected to live in poverty this year alone, according to the World Bank. Many of the most brilliant young brains are running for the hills because things are that horrible. According to the World Bank, 4 million people in Pakistan are projected to live in poverty this year alone, and because things are so horrible, a lot of smart young people are running away. In 2023 alone, about 860,000 Pakistanis left the country in search of jobs and higher education, leaving the country deprived of an intellectual and educated workforce. These are some of the things that Pakistanis would have to consider before they go to the polls on the 8th. The biggest threat is the debt. The country, due to its help during the Cold War, has been granted access to IMF loans. The IMF and other Western institutions provided financial assistance, but the amounts exceeded Pakistan's ability to repay. As of September 2023, the total public debt and liabilities of Pakistan is at around $128 billion. About 15% of the external debt is owned by China due to its investment in China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. This debt falls under a bilateral agreement with China along with Paris Club debt. The Paris Club is a creditor that provides debt treatments to debtor countries in the form of rescheduling, which is debt relief by postponement, or in the case of concessional rescheduling, reduction in debt service obligations during a defined period. Apart from these bilateral debts, about 18% are private lenders composed of banks, which can cause trouble to Pakistan if interests are not paid on time. Pakistan had a major flood, which made it spend its budget on recovering. With a notable depreciation of Pakistan's rupee and diminishing foreign exchange reserves, the country is encountering difficulties in importing essential commodities, including food. This situation has led to distressing stampedes at distribution centers, prompting growing concerns about Pakistan's capacity to fulfill its debt obligations. Concerns about the government's assurances and the reliability of foreign loans caused a delay in the talks between Pakistan and the IMF and other multilateral institutes that fund a majority of the credit. While there is partial agreement on reform actions and measures, unresolved issues persist. The IMF has raised apprehensions about the government's capacity to fulfill previous commitments. What Pakistan needs at this point is interest relaxation from these creditors, an action that should be in China's interest given its investment in CPEC. An unstable Pakistan means an unstable China's trade ambition with the world. It's in the creditor's interest also for Pakistan to have a stable government that can increase revenue for the country and decrease spending on military by having peace policies with reasonable neighbors. And this time, even Pakistan's nuclear weapons are at risk. In order to prevent militants in Pakistan from acquiring these weapons, the West and Pakistan's creditors must help the country with its debt and keep funding it. Pakistan's nuclear weapons are an issue of not only national security, but global security, and the country has made efforts to ensure their safety. But with a rise in militant activities and citizens losing faith in the army, superpowers must swing in to ensure the safety of Pakistan's nuclear program. Even though it's quite unlikely that jihadists could get their hands on the country's nuclear weapons, the consequences are way too big to ignore this threat. One way of ensuring the safety of Pakistan's nuclear program is through a stable economy and restoring the populace's faith in the country. And the only way out of Pakistan's economic crisis is for the country's government to be strong and responsible. Recently, economic growth has been stunted as a result of the country's political unrest, and it could worsen or completely change for the better as Pakistanis visit the polls on February 8th. But what do you think? Will Pakistan be able to pull itself out of this economic crisis and ensure the safety of its nuclear program? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos.